My daughter's fiancé called me a washed-up nobody who should stay in my lane. I'm 72 years old, and I've spent 45 years building something my daughter never bothered to ask about. She was marrying a venture capitalist worth $50 million, announced it to her corporate network of executives and investors, and my 10-year-old grandson pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner, whispering that something was very wrong. What she didn't know was that the struggling graphic design studio she thought I owned was just one piece. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The investment firm backing her fiancé's companies? I own that too. And 20 minutes after my grandson's warning, I made one phone call that would unravel everything. I didn't make a scene, I didn't argue, I just listened to a child who saw what the adults were too blind to notice. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because this story starts when a 10-year-old boy had more courage than every adult in that room combined. That courage would cost my daughter her fairy tale wedding, but it would save her from something far worse. Most people look at me and see exactly what my daughter sees. A man in his early 70s who drives a 20-year-old Chevy Silverado with rust spots and a cracked windshield. Someone who wears the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation and brings store-brand cookies to family gatherings where everyone else orders from boutique bakeries. My daughter Sarah, 42 years old, vice president at a marketing firm, earning $200,000 a year, absolutely convinced her old man peaked in 1985. Grandpa still does his little design projects, she told her fiancé's family last Thanksgiving. It's sweet that he keeps himself busy. Little design projects, as if the past 4 decades were a hobby to pass time between early bird specials. The first sign something was wrong came 6 months ago, when Sarah introduced us to Derek Ashford, venture capitalist, Stanford MBA, portfolio of tech startups valued at $50 million, drives a Tesla Model S, wears suits that cost more than my monthly expenses. But it wasn't Derek that worried me. It was how my grandson acted around him. 10-year-old Jamie would go quiet whenever Derek entered the room. The kid who normally couldn't stop talking about Pokemon cards and soccer practice would suddenly find reasons to leave. Sarah never noticed. She was too busy planning the wedding of the century. 400 guests at the Fairmont Hotel, celebrity wedding planner, dress that cost $18,000, flower arrangements that required flying in orchids from Thailand. The budget kept climbing. $50,000, then $80,000, then $120,000. Sarah kept saying Derek's parents were helping, that his family insisted on covering most expenses because they were so excited about the union of 2 successful families. Successful families. My daughter earned a good living, sure, but Derek's family moved in different circles. His father owned a private equity firm. His mother sat on 3 corporate boards. They had vacation homes in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard. They donated wings to hospitals and got buildings named after them at universities. And Sarah wanted desperately to belong in that world. I started noticing changes in her about 3 months ago. She stopped inviting me to dinners with Derek's family. When I did attend events, she'd introduce me quickly, then steer conversations away from my background. My father's retired, she'd say. He used to do some design work. Used to. Past tense, as if I'd died but nobody told me. The breaking point should have been what happened at the engagement party 2 months ago. Derek's parents hosted it at their country club. 300 people, open bar, live band, ice sculptures. I showed up in my cleanest flannel shirt and the sport coat I'd owned for 20 years. Sarah took one look at me and her face fell. "Dad," she whispered, pulling me aside. "This is a formal event. I tried to tell you to dress up." "I am dressed up. This is a country club. These people expect a certain standard." "Sarah," I said quietly, "I'm your father." "I know, and I love you. But Derek's parents have already been asking questions about your financial situation. They're concerned about inheritance issues and family backgrounds. We can't give them more reasons to worry." Reasons to worry. As if I were a liability she needed to manage. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled and spent the evening making small talk with people who looked at my sport coat the way you'd look at a museum exhibit from the Great Depression. Derek's father cornered me near the bar. "So you're in graphic design. That's a tough field. Lots of competition from younger designers and AI now." I nodded. "It keeps me busy." "Any retirement savings? Or is Sarah going to need to help support you down the line?" The question hung in the air like cigarette smoke. "Sarah won't need to support me." Good, good. Just asking because Derek and Sarah will have their own expenses. Children are expensive. We want to make sure there are no unexpected financial burdens on the young couple. Unexpected financial burdens. I was being evaluated like a stock Derek's father was considering shorting. My grandson saw it all. Jamie watched my daughter introduce me as her retired father who did small design projects. He watched Derek's family treat me like a charity case they were being polite about. And unlike every adult in that room, he saw something else too. The rehearsal dinner was last Friday. 150 people, private room at an upscale restaurant, everyone dressed like they were attending the Oscars. I wore the same sport coat. Sarah didn't even look at me when I arrived. She was too busy coordinating with the wedding planner and making sure Derek's family had the best seats. Jamie found me during cocktail hour. He'd been quiet all evening, staying close to the walls while adults laughed and drank expensive wine. "Grandpa," he whispered, pulling on my sleeve. "Can we talk outside?" "Of course, buddy." We walked out to the restaurant's terrace. It was early October, still warm in Northern California, and the sun was setting over the valley. Jamie looked at me with an expression too serious for a 10-year-old boy. "You have to stop the wedding." I knelt down to his level. "Jamie, why would I do that?" "Because something is wrong with Derek." "What do you mean?" Jamie's eyes filled with tears. "He's mean to Mom when nobody's watching. He yells at her about money and says she's lucky he's marrying her because nobody else would want someone from her background. And he told her that after they're married, you can't come around anymore because his parents don't want to be associated with poor relatives." The words hit me like cold water. "Are you sure you heard that?" Jamie nodded. "Last week when Mom brought me to Derek's apartment, they thought I was playing video games with my headphones on, but I heard them fighting. Derek said his parents are only accepting the marriage if Mom agrees to certain conditions. One of them is that you stay away from family events because you're an embarrassment." My grandson was crying now. "Grandpa, I don't want you to go away, and I don't want Mom to marry someone who's mean to her. But every time I try to tell her, she says I'm imagining things or that I'm just upset about getting a stepdad." I pulled Jamie into a hug and felt rage building in my chest. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, calculated kind that comes from watching someone you love being manipulated. "How long have you known this, buddy?" 2 months. I keep trying to tell Mom, but she won't listen. She just keeps saying that Derek's family is important and we need to make good impressions and that everything will be better after the wedding." Jamie pulled back and looked at me. "Grandpa, can you stop it? You're the only one who might be able to do something." I stood up and looked back through the windows at the rehearsal dinner, at my daughter laughing with Derek's parents, at Derek holding court with his groomsmen, expensive watch glinting under the chandelier lights, at a room full of people who thought they knew exactly who everyone was and where everyone belonged. I pulled out my phone. Jamie watched as I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in 6 months. I pressed dial and waited. The phone rang twice. "Mitchell speaking." "Mitchell, it's me. I need you to pull the file on Ashford Ventures, Derek Ashford's venture capital firm." There was a pause. "The one we've been funding for the past 3 years?" "That's the one. I need a complete breakdown of their financial position by tomorrow morning. And Mitchell, find everything, every loan, every obligation, every promise they've made." I hung up and looked at my grandson. "Jamie, I'm going to need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He nodded, wiping his eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to listen to you, because you're the only person here who's been paying attention to what matters." What my daughter didn't know was that I'd been watching Derek for months. Not because I was suspicious at first, but because I make it my business to understand anyone who becomes important to my family. When Sarah first mentioned him, I did what I always do. I looked into his background, his business, his reputation. What I found was interesting. Derek Ashford ran a venture capital firm called Ashford Ventures. On paper, it looked impressive. Investments in 7 tech startups, portfolio valued at $50 million, offices in San Francisco and Austin. But when you dug deeper, things got murky. 3 of those startups had failed in the past 2 years. 2 more were hemorrhaging cash. The portfolio valuation was based on projections, not actual returns. And the funding keeping everything afloat? That came from a private investment firm called Cascade Capital Group. Derek didn't know that I owned Cascade Capital Group. Nobody knew except my attorneys and my business partners. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's how I'd operated for 45 years. Quietly, carefully, building wealth that nobody could see because I never needed them to see it. I started my design studio in 1978 with $800 in a used drafting table. Back then, corporate identity was just becoming a real industry. Companies were starting to understand that logos and branding mattered. I was good at it. Very good. By 1985, I had contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. By 1990, I designed brand identities for 12 major corporations. The money came in faster than I knew what to do with it, so I invested. Real estate first, then stocks, then private equity. I bought a small investment firm in 1995 for $2 million. It was struggling, managed by people who didn't understand how to evaluate risk. I turned it around in 3 years and renamed it Cascade Capital Group. By 2000, we were managing $400 million in assets. Today, we manage $2.3 billion. My daughter knew I had a design studio. She'd visited it a few times when she was younger, seen the small office with its 3 employees and modest furniture. What she didn't know was that the studio was just the visible part, the part I kept running because I genuinely loved the work. The investment firm operated from different offices across town, under management I trusted, with my name nowhere on the public documentation. I'd set it up that way deliberately. Old money stays quiet, my father used to say. It's new money that needs everyone to know it exists. I took that lesson to heart. I drove an old truck because it ran fine. I wore flannel shirts because they were comfortable. I brought store-brand cookies because they tasted the same as expensive ones. None of it was about the money. It was about not needing to prove anything to anyone. But Derek Ashford was different. He was new money trying desperately to look like old money. The expensive car, the designer suits, the country club membership, all of it was performance. And the money funding that performance? A significant portion came from Cascade Capital Group. We'd invested $6 million in Ashford Ventures 3 years ago, based on projections that never materialized. Derek had been missing quarterly targets for 18 months. His investors were getting nervous. And according to my conversations with Mitchell, our chief financial officer, Derek had been making promises he couldn't keep, promising returns that didn't exist, promising stability while his portfolio crumbled. He was running out of time and running out of money, which made me wonder why he was spending $120,000 on a wedding. The answer came to me as I stood on that terrace with my grandson. Derek wasn't marrying my daughter because he loved her. He was marrying her because he needed her. Sarah had a solid income, good credit, and a reputation in the business community. More importantly, she was desperate to marry into wealth and status. That desperation made her controllable. Derek could position her as his successful wife while using her income and credit to prop up his failing business. And once they were married, he could access her finances, her network, her credibility. It was a business transaction dressed up as romance. And the condition about keeping me away from family events? That wasn't about embarrassment. It was about control. Derek couldn't risk anyone asking questions about his business. Couldn't risk someone who might actually understand finance looking too closely at his portfolio. As long as everyone believed I was just a retired graphic designer, nobody would think to ask me about venture capital or investment strategy. I walked back inside with Jamie. The rehearsal dinner was in full swing. Derek was making a toast, champagne glass raised, talking about how lucky he was to marry into such a wonderful family, how Sarah had brought light into his life, how he couldn't wait to build a future together. Everyone applauded. Sarah looked radiant, glowing with happiness, completely unaware that the man she was marrying saw her as a solution to his financial problems. I found Mitchell's text message on my phone. Report ready. Sending encrypted file now. I opened it and spent 5 minutes reading through financial statements while pretending to check my email. The situation was worse than I thought. Ashford Ventures was $7 million in debt. Derek had taken out personal loans against his business to maintain his lifestyle. The Tesla was leased. The apartment was rented. Even the watch he wore was financed. He was a house of cards held together by credit and other people's money. Derek's father approached me near the bar. He was drinking scotch that probably cost $50 a glass, wearing a suit that cost $5,000, radiating the confidence of someone who never had to worry about money. "We haven't had much chance to talk," he said. "I'm sure Sarah mentioned I run a private equity firm." She might have mentioned it. We do quite well. Assets under management exceeding $800 million. We specialize in tech sector investments, particularly in the venture capital space. He said it like he was bestowing information on someone who wouldn't understand. That's impressive. $800 million is a respectable portfolio. He looked surprised that I knew what assets under management meant. "You follow finance?" "A little. My design work involves understanding business fundamentals, client relations, you know." He nodded, already losing interest. "Well, the reason I mention it is that Derek and I have been discussing bringing Sarah into some of our investment conversations after the wedding. She has a good head for marketing, and we could use someone who understands branding in our portfolio companies." It was smooth, so smooth that someone who didn't know better would think it was a generous offer. But I heard what he wasn't saying. They wanted Sarah's expertise without paying for it. Wanted to use her skills and her network while making her feel grateful for the access. Meanwhile, they'd keep my father at a distance because poor relatives complicated the narrative they were building. "How does Derek's business fit into your portfolio?" I asked casually. "Oh, Derek operates independently. We advised him when he was starting out, of course, but he's built Ashford Ventures on his own merit." His father's pride was evident. "The boy has a gift for identifying promising startups. 3 successful exits in the past 5 years. 3 successful exits? That was interesting, because according to the financial statements I just read, Derek had 0 successful exits. He'd sold portions of failing companies to other investors before they collapsed completely. That's not an exit. That's cutting losses." I smiled and nodded. "He must be doing very well then." "Very well indeed. Which is why we're confident he can provide Sarah with the lifestyle she deserves." A lifestyle she deserves. As if my daughter needed someone to provide for her. As if her 6-figure salary and her own accomplishments weren't enough. Derek's father leaned in closer. "Between you and me, we were initially concerned about the match. Different backgrounds, different social circles. But Derek convinced us that Sarah has the right qualities. She's ambitious, presentable, and most importantly, she understands her place." Understands her place. The words hung in the air like a threat disguised as a compliment. My daughter, who'd built her own career, who'd raised a son mostly on her own after divorcing Jamie's father, who'd earned everything she had through her own work, needed to understand her place? I felt my phone vibrate. Another message from Mitchell. "Found something else. Third-party background check shows Ashford has been investigated twice by SEC for possible securities fraud. No charges filed, but patterns concerning. Recommend immediate withdrawal of our investment." I looked at Derek across the room. He was laughing with his groomsmen, champagne in hand, playing the role of successful entrepreneur celebrating his upcoming marriage. In 24 hours, he'd marry my daughter. He'd gain access to her finances, her reputation, her life. He'd isolate her from his family under the guise of social expectations. And when his house of cards finally collapsed, she'd be left holding the debris. Unless someone stopped it. I walked back inside with Jamie. The rehearsal dinner was in full swing. Derek was making a toast, champagne glass raised, talking about how lucky he was to marry into such a wonderful family, how Sarah had brought light into his life, how he couldn't. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon. I woke up at 5 in the morning, made coffee in my small kitchen, and watched the sunrise through windows that hadn't been cleaned in 6 months. My house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch I'd bought in 1982 for $60,000. It was worth maybe $400,000 now, in a neighborhood where families mowed their own lawns and kids rode bikes in the street. Sarah hadn't visited in 2 years. Joey suggested we meet at restaurants instead, neutral territory, where Derek's family wouldn't accidentally discover where her father actually lived. I didn't mind. The house suited me fine. But this morning, sitting in my kitchen with coffee and financial reports spread across the table, I wondered what my daughter would think if she knew the truth. Would it change anything? Would she suddenly see me differently, or would she resent me for hiding it? I didn't have good answers to those questions. Mitchell called at 6:30. The board meeting's set for 9 o'clock. Everyone's flying in. They're not happy about the emergency summons, but they'll be there. How many investors total in Ashford Ventures? 7, including Cascade Capital. Our $6 million is the largest single investment. The others range from $500,000 to $2 million each. When we pull our funding and call the loans, what happens to the others? Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Their investments become worthless. Ashford Ventures can't operate without our capital. The company will collapse within days, maybe hours. And Derek personally? Bankruptcy. He's leveraged everything against the business. The apartment, the car, even his personal accounts. When we call the loans, he'll lose it all. I sipped my coffee. Make sure every investor understands why we're pulling out. Show them the SEC investigation reports, the failed portfolio companies, the falsified projections. I want complete transparency. Tom, this is going to destroy him. That's the point. No, I mean this will end his career. Nobody in venture capital will touch him after this. Word spreads fast in our industry. He'll be blacklisted. Good. Maybe the next time someone thinks about marrying a woman to solve their financial problems, they'll remember what happened to Derek Ashford. I hung up and sat in the silence of my kitchen. In 5 hours, my daughter would be getting ready for her wedding. Hair appointments, makeup, final dress fitting. She'd be excited, nervous, dreaming about her future with a man who saw her as a financial asset. And she'd have no idea that her father was systematically dismantling her fiancé's entire life. Jamie had texted me at midnight. I'd given him my number after the rehearsal dinner and told him to reach out if he needed anything. The message was simple. Thank you for listening, Grandpa. I love you. I'd responded, I love you too, buddy. Everything's going to be okay. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I wanted him to believe it. At 8 o'clock, I drove to my design studio. The building was a converted warehouse in an older part of town, nothing fancy, with my company name painted on a modest sign out front. 3 employees worked there, all of them designers I'd mentored over the years. They handled client work while I focused on special projects and occasional consultations. None of them knew about Cascade Capital Group. As far as they were concerned, I was just an old designer who refused to fully retire. I unlocked the office and went to my private workspace in the back. Filed away in cabinets that looked like they held old design projects were documents that told a different story. Partnership agreements, investment portfolios, real estate holdings. I pulled out the Ashford Ventures file and reviewed it one more time. $6 million invested in 2021 based on projections showing 30% annual growth. Actual performance showed 12% losses compounded over 3 years. Multiple missed milestones, 2 failed portfolio companies that Derek had neglected to report to investors, and the SEC investigations that Mitchell had uncovered. Preliminary inquiries into whether Derek had misrepresented company valuations to attract investment. It was fraud. Not the dramatic, headline-grabbing kind, but the quiet, sophisticated kind that happened in boardrooms and conference calls. The kind where someone in an expensive suit convinced people to trust him with their money, then used that money to fund a lifestyle instead of building actual value. I'd seen it before. Hell, I'd shut down 3 similar operations in the past decade through Cascade Capital. We had a reputation in private equity circles. Conservative, careful, ruthless when we smelled deception. Other firms called us the auditors. We didn't chase high returns. We chased sustainable returns. And when we found someone playing games with investor money, we burned them to the ground. Derek Ashford was about to learn that lesson personally. My phone rang at 8:45. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. What could I possibly say to her 3 hours before her wedding? But I picked up anyway. Dad, where are you? At the studio? Why? The wedding's at 2. I need you there by noon for photos. I'll be there. You promise? You're not going to disappear or show up late like you did at my college graduation? Sarah, I was 15 minutes late to your graduation because I was closing a deal with a client. I apologized then, and I'm not going to relitigate it now. There was silence on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice was tight. Dad, can you just once not make everything difficult? Can you just show up on time, wear something appropriate, and not embarrass me in front of Derek's family? I've never embarrassed you. You embarrass yourself by acting like I'm some kind of burden you have to manage. That's not fair. Isn't it? You haven't invited me to a family dinner in 6 months. You introduced me as your retired father like I'm already dead. You're getting married today, and I don't think you've asked me a single question about my life in the past year. Because you don't tell me anything. You just sit in your studio doing your little projects and acting like the world hasn't moved on without you. The world hasn't moved on without me, Sarah. You have moved on without me. There's a difference. She hung up. I sat in my office holding the phone, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Maybe Derek was exactly who he appeared to be. Maybe I was seeing threats that didn't exist. Maybe my grandson had misunderstood what he heard. But then I looked at the financial reports again, at the patterns of deception and the trail of failed promises, at the SEC investigation notes that mentioned aggressive sales tactics and possible misrepresentation of assets. This was fraud. Not the dramatic, headline-grabbing kind, but the quiet, sophisticated kind that happened in boardrooms and conference calls. The kind where someone in an expensive suit convinced people to trust him with their money, then used that money to fund a lifestyle instead of building actual value. I'd seen it before. Hell, I'd shut down 3 similar operations in the past decade through Cascade Capital. We had a reputation in private equity circles. Conservative, careful, ruthless when we smelled deception. Other firms called us the auditors. We didn't chase high returns. We chased sustainable returns. And when we found someone playing games with investor money, we burned them to the ground. Derek Ashford was about to learn that lesson personally. My phone rang at 9 a.m. How did the board meeting go? You were right. When the other investors saw the full picture, they voted unanimously to withdraw. We're filing paperwork now to call all loans and terminate the investment agreement. Derek will be notified by 10:30, 2 hours before the wedding. Mitchell, I need you to do one more thing. I need you to prepare a full disclosure package. Everything we found on Ashford Ventures, everything about Derek's financial situation, everything about the SEC investigations. Print it, put it in a folder, and have it couriered to the Fairmont Hotel. Address it to Sarah, but mark it to be delivered after the ceremony. After the ceremony? If I'm wrong about Derek, if somehow there's an explanation for all of this, then Sarah deserves to make her own choice. But if I'm right, she needs to know the truth before it's too late to protect herself legally. Tom, if you're right and she goes through with the wedding anyway, she'll be legally tied to his debts. That's her decision to make. I can give her information. I can't make her choices for her. I hung up and drove toward the Fairmont Hotel. Traffic was light on Saturday morning. I took surface streets instead of the highway, passing through neighborhoods where I'd lived over the years. The apartment where Sarah grew up, a small 2-bedroom where I raised her alone after her mother left when she was 3. The elementary school where I'd volunteered as a classroom helper because single dads weren't common in the 1980s, and I wanted her to know I was present. The park where we'd spent Saturday afternoons when she was young, before she discovered that other kids had fathers who wore suits to work instead of paint-stained jeans. I'd done my best. Worked during the day at the design studio, took care of Sarah in the evenings, built my investment portfolio late at night after she was asleep. I wanted to give her everything, but I also wanted to teach her that worth wasn't measured in bank accounts or country club memberships. Looking back, I wasn't sure I'd succeeded at either goal. At 10:15, my phone buzzed with a message from Mitchell. Paperwork filed, Ashford notified. His attorney is calling it a legal termination and threatening to sue. Let him sue. We have documentation of every breach of contract, every missed milestone, every misrepresented projection. Any judge will side with us. Another message came through 30 seconds later. Ashford is trying to call you, blocking his number. I pulled into the Fairmont parking lot and sat in my truck for a moment. Through the hotel windows, I could see people moving around, setting up for the ceremony, flowers being arranged, chairs being positioned, a life being constructed around a lie. In 2 hours, my daughter would be walking down an aisle to a man whose entire existence was collapsing. And I was the one who had lit the match. I walked into the Fairmont at 11 o'clock, wearing the same sport coat I'd worn to every family event for 20 years. The lobby was chaos. Wedding coordinators rushing around with clipboards, florists adjusting arrangements, hotel staff setting up the ballroom. Nobody looked at me twice. Just another guest arriving early, probably someone's elderly relative who didn't understand that you weren't supposed to show up 3 hours before the ceremony. I found Sarah in the bridal suite on the 3rd floor. The door was open, and I could hear laughter inside. Bridesmaids fussing over details, champagne being poured even though it wasn't even noon yet. I knocked, and Sarah appeared in the doorway wearing a white robe, her hair already styled, makeup half finished. "Dad, you're early. I said noon." "I know, but I wanted to talk to you before things got too busy." Her face softened slightly. "Okay, let me just tell the girls." She stepped back inside, and I heard her say something about giving her a minute with her father. The bridesmaids filed out, all of them dressed in expensive matching robes, carrying champagne glasses, looking at me like I was interrupting something sacred. Sarah closed the door, and we stood in the bridal suite surrounded by flowers and wedding dress bags and gift boxes from stores I'd never heard of. She looked beautiful, nervous and excited and terrified all at once, the way brides are supposed to look. "Dad, if you're here to give me some speech about marriage or making sure Derek's the right person, I don't need it. I'm 42 years old. I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not sure you've asked yourself the right questions." "Like what?" "Like why Derek wants to marry you." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Because he loves me, obviously." "Does he? Or does he love what you represent?" "Dad, don't start." "I'm serious, Sarah. What do you actually know about Derek's business?" "I know he runs a successful venture capital firm. He has investments in tech startups. His portfolio is worth $50 million. According to who? According to Derek and his family and literally everyone who knows anything about his business. Have you seen financial statements? Have you met with his investors? Have you done any actual due diligence on the man you're marrying?" Sarah's face went red. "This is my wedding day. I'm not going to stand here and listen to you interrogate my fiancé's finances." "Why not? If you were investing $50 in a stock, you'd research it. But you're investing your entire life in this man, and you're telling me you haven't looked at the numbers? That's different." "How?" "Because marriage isn't a business transaction." "Isn't it?" Sarah stared at me. "What is wrong with you? Why are you trying to ruin this for me?" "I'm trying to protect you." "From what? From my own happiness? From marrying someone successful? From finally having the life I deserve?" "The life you deserve." "Sarah, do you remember what Derek's father said at the engagement party? That you understand your place." She looked away. "He didn't mean it like that." "How did he mean it?" "He meant that I fit into their world, that I'm sophisticated enough and successful enough to be part of their family. He meant that you know how to behave, that you won't ask questions or cause problems or challenge their version of reality." "That's not true." "Then why haven't you invited me to family dinners? Why do you introduce me as your retired father instead of just your father? Why did Derek's parents ask about inheritance issues and financial burdens?" Sarah sat down on the couch, her robe pooling around her. "Because they wanted to make sure you weren't going to be a problem." "A problem? That's the word they used?" "Not exactly. But they asked if you had your own retirement plan, if you owned your home, if you'd need financial support as you got older. And what did you tell them? I told them you were independent, that you'd been taking care of yourself your whole life, and I didn't expect that to change. Did you ever wonder why they were asking? To make sure their son wasn't marrying someone with family complications. And you didn't think that was strange? That grown adults worth hundreds of millions of dollars were worried about whether your father might need help someday? I didn't think about it at all, Sarah snapped. I was too busy trying to make sure they accepted me, too busy trying to prove I belonged in their world, too busy trying not to be embarrassed by my father who shows up to country clubs in 20-year-old sport coats. We sat in silence. Through the windows, I could see the hotel grounds, the lawn where the ceremony would take place, chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arch covered in white roses that probably cost $5,000. Sarah, I need to tell you something. What? Derek's business is failing. That's not true. His venture capital firm is $7 million in debt. 3 of his portfolio companies have collapsed. 2 more are on the verge of bankruptcy. The $50 million valuation is based on projections that will never materialize. Sarah stood up. How would you even know that? Because I looked into it. You investigated my fiancé? I protected my daughter. There's a difference. Sarah's voice got loud. You had no right. You had no right to go behind my back and investigate the man I'm marrying. What gives you that right? The fact that I'm your father and I saw warning signs. What warning signs? Your own son came to me at the rehearsal dinner and begged me to stop this wedding. He told me Derek is mean to you when nobody's watching, that Derek yells at you about money, that Derek told you I can't come to family events anymore because his parents don't want to be associated with poor relatives. Sarah went very still. Jamie told you that? Yes. And instead of talking to me about it, you went and investigated Derek's business? I did both. I listened to my grandson and I verified the facts. And now I'm telling you that the man you're about to marry is not who he claims to be. What are you talking about? Derek's firm received $6 million in investment from a private equity company 3 years ago. He's missed every quarterly target since then. He's falsified projections to investors. He's been investigated twice by the SEC for possible securities fraud. No charges were filed, but the pattern is clear. He's running a failing business and using other people's money to maintain the illusion of success. Sarah was shaking now. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, what does it have to do with our marriage? Everything. Because Derek isn't marrying you for love. He's marrying you because he needs your income, your credit, your reputation. You're a financial asset to him, not a partner. That's insane. Is it? Think about it, Sarah. When did Derek propose? 6 months ago, right after his biggest portfolio company failed and his investors started asking hard questions. When did he start planning this elaborate, expensive wedding? Immediately. $120,000 for one day. Where do you think that money is coming from? His family is helping. Are they? Or are they telling you they're helping while Derek racks up debt in both your names? Sarah grabbed her phone. I'm calling Derek right now, and you're going to apologize for these accusations. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Why not? Because at 10:30 this morning, Derek's primary investor pulled their funding and called all loans. His business is collapsing as we speak. Sarah stared at me. What did you do? I protected my investment. Your investment? The $6 million that's been funding Ashford Ventures for 3 years, that came from my company. Sarah dropped her phone. My company? Dad, you don't have $6 million. You drive a truck that's older than my son. Actually, Sarah, I have quite a bit more than $6 million. And if you'd ever asked me about my life, instead of assuming you knew everything based on my truck and my flannel shirts, you might have learned that a long time ago. The door opened, and one of the bridesmaids stuck her head in. "Sarah, the photographer wants to start in 10 minutes. Everything okay?" Sarah didn't take her eyes off me. "Get out!" The bridesmaid looked confused. "What?" Sarah's voice was shaking. "Everybody out! I need to talk to my father alone, now!" The bridesmaids left quickly, grabbing champagne glasses and gift bags, shooting worried glances at Sarah as they filed out. The door closed, and we were alone. Sarah stood in the middle of the bridal suite in her white robe, makeup half done, looking at me like she'd never seen me before. "How much money do you have? That's not the important question right now. How much?" "I founded an investment firm in 1995. It's called Cascade Capital Group. We manage $2.3 billion in assets. We specialize in private equity, venture capital oversight, and commercial real estate. The $6 million we invested in Derek's firm 3 years ago represents 0.2% of our portfolio." Sarah sat down slowly. $2.3 billion. Managed, not owned. My personal net worth is approximately $85 million. Most of it's tied up in real estate holdings and long-term investments. Some of it's liquid. All of it's real. She put her head in her hands. "I don't understand. Why would you hide this?" "I didn't hide it. You never asked." "I asked about your work all the time when I was younger. You asked about my design studio. I told you about my design studio. That's not hiding, Sarah. That's answering the question you actually asked. But you let me think you were struggling. Let everyone think you were barely getting by. I let people make their own assumptions. There's a difference." Sarah looked up at me with tears starting to run through her makeup. "Dad, I've been so awful to you. I introduced you as my retired father. I didn't invite you to dinners because I was embarrassed. I let Derek's parents ask about your financial stability like you were some kind of charity case. And the whole time, you were worth more than all of them combined." "Not more than all of them combined. Derek's father's firm manages $800 million. That's substantial. But yes, I'm significantly wealthier than anyone realized." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to see who you'd become without it. My father was wealthy, Sarah. Not billions, but enough. And it ruined him. He spent his whole life worried about people using him for money, suspicious of every friendship, every relationship. He died angry and alone because he couldn't trust anyone. I didn't want that for you, and I didn't want it for myself. So I built my wealth quietly, and I lived simply, and I let people think whatever they wanted to think." Sarah was crying openly now. "But I judged you. I was ashamed of you. I made you feel like you weren't good enough." "You made yourself feel like you weren't good enough," I said gently. "I was fine. I am fine. I drive an old truck because it runs perfectly and I see no reason to replace it. I wear comfortable clothes because I'm 72 years old and I don't care about impressing strangers. I live in a modest house because it's paid off and it's got everything I need. None of that is suffering, Sarah. That's just living according to different values than the ones Derek's family taught you to worship." She put her head in her hands. "What am I supposed to do now? The wedding starts in an hour. Derek's entire life is collapsing, and I'm standing here in a wedding dress about to marry him." "That's your choice to make. I can't make it for you." "But Dad, if what you're saying is true, if Derek's business is really failing and he was just using me, how can I go through with it?" "Can you? That's the question you need to answer. Do you love him enough to stand by him through bankruptcy and failure? Because that's what you're signing up for if you marry him today. Or do you love the idea of him, the successful venture capitalist with the rich family and the country club connections?" Sarah stood up and walked to the window. Below, guests were starting to arrive. Expensive cars pulling up to the valet, people in designer clothes walking across the lawn, Derek's groomsmen gathering near the ceremony arch. "My whole life is down there. Everyone I know, everyone who matters in my career, they're all here to watch me get married." "So get married. But know what you're getting into. Know that Derek sees you as a solution to his problems, not a partner. Know that his parents wanted you to understand your place because they see you as beneath them. Know that your own son was scared enough to beg your grandfather to stop the wedding. Take all of that information and make your choice." "But Dad, if I don't go through with it, I'll be humiliated. Everyone will know I canceled my wedding an hour before the ceremony." You'll survive humiliation. I'm not sure you'll survive a marriage built on lies." There was a knock at the door. Sarah wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. "Come in." Jamie walked in wearing a small suit, his hair carefully combed, looking nervous. "The wedding planner said to check if you're ready for photos." Sarah knelt down to his level. "Hey, buddy, come here." Jamie walked over and Sarah pulled him into a hug. "Did you really tell Grandpa that Derek was mean to me?" Jamie nodded against her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know you wanted to marry him, but he scares me." Sarah pulled back and looked at her son. "Why didn't you tell me you were scared?" "I tried, but you said I was imagining things. You said Derek was just stressed about the wedding and everything would be better afterward." Jamie's eyes filled with tears. "I heard him yelling at you, Mom. He said you were lucky he was marrying you because nobody else would want someone from your background. He said Grandpa was an embarrassment, and after the wedding, we couldn't see him anymore. Is that true?" Sarah looked at me, then back at Jamie. "Yes, baby, that's true." "Then why are you still marrying him?" "That's a very good question." Sarah stood up and walked to the garment bag hanging on the back of the door. Inside was her $18,000 wedding dress, custom-made, fitted perfectly, designed to make her look like she belonged in Derek's world. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she turned back to us. "Jamie, do you want to know a secret?" "What?" "Your grandpa is really, really rich. Like, really rich." Jamie looked at me in confusion. "But Grandpa drives an old truck." "That's the secret," Sarah said. "He drives an old truck because he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He's worth more money than I'll probably make in my entire life. And he's been helping people and running a business and being successful this whole time, and I didn't know because I never bothered to ask. I just assumed I knew everything based on his truck and his clothes." Jamie processed this. "So, Grandpa's like a secret superhero?" Sarah laughed through her tears. "Yeah, buddy, he's like a secret superhero, and today he saved me from making a really big mistake." She walked to the phone and picked it up. "What are you doing?" "I'm calling the wedding coordinator. Tell her the wedding is canceled." "Sarah, are you sure?" "I'm sure that I don't want to marry someone who yells at me about money and calls my father an embarrassment. I'm sure that I don't want to raise my son in a family that values appearances over character. And I'm sure that I'm tired of trying to be someone I'm not, just to belong in a world that doesn't actually want me." She dialed and waited. "Yes, this is Sarah in the bridal suite. I need you to make an announcement. The wedding is canceled, effective immediately. Please inform the guests and the groom." She hung up and looked at me. "Dad, I'm so sorry for everything, for being ashamed of you, for not seeing what was right in front of me, for choosing Derek's world over my own family." "Sarah, you don't have to apologize. Yes, I do. You spent your whole life taking care of me, supporting me, making sure I had everything I needed, and I repaid you by treating you like you were beneath me, like you weren't successful enough or sophisticated enough or worthy enough to be part of my life. That's going to haunt me for a long time." We could hear commotion starting outside, voices raised in confusion, people asking questions, the wedding coordinator's voice over a speaker system announcing that the ceremony had been postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. Sarah walked to me and hugged me tight. "Thank you for listening to Jamie. Thank you for protecting me even when I didn't deserve it." "You always deserve protection," I said quietly. "You're my daughter. That doesn't change because we disagree or because you make mistakes." Jamie joined the hug, and we stood there in the bridal suite while outside, Sarah's carefully constructed wedding fell apart. 3 months later, Sarah invited me to dinner at her apartment. Not the luxury place Derek had helped her pick out, but a smaller 2-bedroom she'd found in a neighborhood with good schools and reasonable rent. Jamie answered the door with a huge smile. "Grandpa, you're here." "I brought store-brand cookies." Jamie laughed. "Mom says those are the best kind because they taste exactly like expensive cookies, but you don't have to prove anything by buying them." "Smart kid." Sarah appeared from the kitchen wearing jeans and a sweater, no makeup, hair in a ponytail. She looked more like herself than she had in years. "Hey, Dad, come in." The apartment was modest but comfortable, furniture that looked lived in instead of staged, kids' artwork on the refrigerator, books on shelves instead of decorator objects chosen to impress visitors. We ate spaghetti that Sarah made herself, not ordered from an expensive restaurant. We talked about Jamie's soccer team and Sarah's new job at a smaller marketing firm where she'd taken a pay cut but gained work-life balance. And for the first time in years, we talked about my work. Really talked. Sarah asked about Cascade Capital, about how I'd built it, about the properties I owned and the investments I managed. She asked questions like she genuinely wanted to understand, not like she was checking boxes to prove she cared. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, about how you wanted to see who I'd become without knowing about the money. I understand why you did it now, but I wish I'd become someone better. You're becoming someone better right now. That's what matters. She smiled. Jamie starts asking me about business stuff now. He wants to understand how investing works and how you build wealth. I think he's going to be like you someday, careful and smart and not needing to prove anything. That's the best compliment you could give me. As I was leaving, Sarah walked me to my truck. The same old Silverado, still running fine. She looked at it and laughed. You know, I used to be so embarrassed by this truck. Now I think it's perfect. Why's that? Because it runs great and it gets you where you need to go and it doesn't care what anyone thinks about it. Kind of like you. I hugged my daughter and drove home through streets I'd known for decades, past the studio where I still worked a few days a week, through neighborhoods where people lived. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.